When it comes to urban legends, the tales often originate from fantastical and unbelievable stories that have endured the test of time, told more for entertainment or a cheap scare, and sometimes as a cautionary tale, warning outsiders away from areas of potential danger. But usually, there is some underlying truth to the tales, which only leads to the imaginations of the storytellers taking control, and the stories taking on a life of their own, becoming more and more outrageous with each retelling. Lake Lanier, a reserve located in the northern portion of Georgia, is not immune to this exaggerated storytelling. The lake, which was constructed over the top of what was once a predominantly African-American town by the name of Oscarville, hides many tragic secrets. With the remains of the former buildings of Oscarville hidden in the murky depths of the lake waters, ensnaring many boats, the waters of Lake Lanier have been deemed the most deadly in all of the United States, taking nearly 500 lives since its formation in the 1950s, and over 200 deaths since 1994 alone. There have been many reports from individuals that have taken a swim in Lake Lanier that they have felt unseen hands grabbing them, attempting to pull them under the water. But the stories surrounding Lake Lanier are numerous, and as we prepare to dive into a few of the more popular tales, be forewarned, tonight's video is definitely swim at your own risk. Oscarville was formed in the 1800s during the post-war Reconstruction, a period of time in American history that followed the Civil War, which led to the long overdue abolition of slavery. Oscarville was a prosperous and thriving agricultural community made up predominantly of African American residents, a majority of which had recently been freed from slavery and took advantage of their newfound freedom. Of the approximately 1,100 Oscarville residents, 58 of them owned land, 109 rented farms, and many more were employed as craftsmen. But despite the prosperity and freedom, racially motivated discrimination and violence was not only still prevalent, it would prove to be fatal for the African American residents of Georgia. And the events leading up to and following the 1906 Atlanta race riots would prove to be the beginning of the end for Oscarville. The 1906 Atlanta race riot was initiated on the evening of September 22nd, with the publication of numerous unsubstantiated reports in the local papers of graphically detailed rapes of 4 local white women by black males. The result of these falsified stories was mass violence that lasted for 2 whole days, in which numerous black men would be victim to horrific brutality. Men were hung from lampposts, shot, beaten, and stabbed to death. And while there was never an official death toll, it is believed that anywhere between 10 and 100 African American men lost their lives. This violent 2 days would have a ripple effect that extended to Oscarville and would lead to what would later come to be known as the 1912 racial conflict. On September 5th, a 22-year-old white Oscarville resident by the name of Ellen Grice would claim that she had woken up in the middle of the night to find 2 black men in her bedroom, one of which was lying beside her in her bed. She claimed she believed the men were there to attempt to rape her, but her assailants were supposedly scared away by Ellen's mother. The Forsyth County Sheriff arrested 5 men in connection with the case, which would unsettle the African American community. The local preacher, a man by the name of Grant Smith, would appeal to the sheriff to release the men, as there was not proper evidence to detain them. Smith further claimed that Grice was in a consensual relationship with one of the men, and upon being caught by her mother, claimed it as an attempted rape instead of admitting the truth and ostracizing herself. Smith's comments enraged the white community and resulted in a mob surrounding the preacher on the steps of the courthouse. Smith was brutally beaten and horsewhipped. Somehow, he miraculously survived his near-fatal injuries, but sadly, the fate of the 5 men remains unknown. In the woods just outside of Oscarville on the morning of September 13th, The unresponsive body of local white teen May Crow was discovered, hidden under a pile of leaves. She was severely battered and half naked. She had been raped and had a fractured skull, which was later revealed to have been caused by her skull being crushed with a rock. Somehow, Crow was still alive. However, she was unconscious and barely breathing. She would spend 2 weeks in a coma before eventually dying from her injuries. As was the usual response to violent attacks against white women, officials would search in nearby black communities, assuming this would be the place where they would find the perpetrator. The first suspect would be Ernest Knox, a 16-year-old black resident of nearby Cumming, when a mirror that reportedly belonged to Knox was found at the scene of the crime. Authorities would arrest the teen at his home, subjecting him to mock lynchings, eventually coercing a confession out of him. Once the news of Ernest's arrest spread, it further agitated the white community, who would form mobs outside the courthouse where Knox was being detained. The young teen had to be covertly transported out of the rear door of the jailhouse in an effort to keep him alive and away from the hands of the angry mob so he could stand trial. The only solution became moving him to a separate jail. After Ernest was arrested, Knox's cousin Oscar Daniel, age 18, Oscar's sister Jane, age 22, Jane's husband Rob Edwards, age 24, and another unrelated African-American man by the name of Ed Collins would also be arrested as accomplices. While the accused were awaiting trial, a mob of approximately 2,000 white vigilantes stormed the courthouse. Due to the fact that the sheriff had already gone home earlier that evening, the mob was able to gain access to the holding cells. The enraged mob would beat Rob Edwards repeatedly with crowbars and hung a noose around his neck. Then they fatally shot him. Once they were convinced that he was dead, the mob dragged Rob's body to the town square, hung him from a telephone pole like a sick and twisted trophy of their racist self-justice. A crowd would form and would fire additional bullets into the already dead man's body. At trial, both 18-year-old Oscar Daniel and 16-year-old Ernest Knox would be found guilty of the rape and murder of May Crow. Jane Daniels, however, would be acquitted of all charges. Newt Morris, the judge overseeing the trials, would sentence both teens to death by hanging, which was illegal under state law at the time. But as a way around the law, Judge Morris ordered the hangings to take place behind a blind. However, this crude workaround would not end up being a solution, as the night before the executions were set to take place, an arsonist burned down the blind, leaving the gallows untouched, and the hanging fully visible to all 8,000 of the Oscarville residents that attended. On the evening of May Crow's funeral, a group of white individuals on horseback, referring to themselves as night riders, carried out group attacks under the cover of night. These night riders would descend on the black communities of Forsyth County, intent on inflicting damage to both people and property, hoping to purge Forsyth County of all black residents, believing them to be the reason for the increase in violence. Over the course of several months, these attacks would rage, mostly involving arson. At the height of the attacks, the riders firebombed the local black church. When all was said and done, several black residents of Oscarville would lose their lives, some while simply attempting to flee to safety in nearby Gainesville. According to Wikipedia, in 1912 there were 1,098 black residents in Forsyth County, amounting to 10% of the total population. Because of the danger and instability caused by the night riders, most of the black residents left Forsyth County during September and October. Within a few years, 98% of those black residents had either left Forsyth County or had been killed for refusing to leave. Because of the urgency of their situation, black landowners attempting to leave often had no choice but to sell their land at prices far below what the land was worth, and far below what they themselves had paid for the land. Other families were unable to sell their property before leaving, thus receiving no compensation. In the decades that followed these mass expulsions, the land of Oscarville would garner the attention of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who wanted to create a lake to provide Atlanta and its surrounding counties with power and water. The government would approve a construction plan for a man-made reservoir in 1947, and in 1950, the land formerly known as Oscarville would be flooded to create what would become Lake Lanier.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Are you authorized to be backstage?
No. Hey, where's
VENATOS?
Are you allowed to be here?
Just tell me what the
VENATOS.
I want to take a moment to thank this video sponsor, VENATOS. At this point, there isn't much I can say that you don't already know. VENATOS offers quality gaming equipment at an affordable price, and they stand by their work with customer support that is second to none. With free shipping to the US and Canada, VENATOS makes it easy to upgrade your setup without forfeiting quality. Go to VENATOS.com and make sure to use code PRESSSTARTMOM at checkout to secure your 10% discount. Thank you to VENATOS for sponsoring this video and for your unwavering support of the channel. Let's get back to the video. To prepare for the flooding of Oscarville, the Army Corps of Engineers would demolish or relocate anything they deemed dangerous. They uprooted trees, tore down barns and wooden structures, anything that could potentially float back up to the surface. However, not everything was removed. An old racing track was left behind, although the Corps did remove the bleachers. Several home structures, foundations, and cement buildings also remained. But the most egregious of the landmarks left behind? The Oscarville Cemetery. The gravestones and bodies still remain under the depths of the waters of Lake Lanier. In 2017, longtime diver Buck Buchanan would tell local media that he sometimes felt body parts in the lake during his numerous diving expeditions. You reach out in the dark, he said, and you feel an arm or a leg, and it doesn't move. But what we don't know is if these bodies are the remains of those that were once buried in the Oscarville Cemetery, or the many others that have lost their lives on these waters in the years since. By May of 2024, there had already been 15 drowning deaths in that year alone, tripling that of any other lakes in the area. But while the root cause of the alarming number of drowning deaths in Lake Lanier may lean more heavily into urban legend territory, pointing towards ghosts as the culprit, the deaths themselves are fact. However, no one has been able to determine why the number of deaths at this particular lake eclipsed that of any lake not just in the surrounding area, but the entire United States. And with so many deaths occurring, it would not be long before scary tales would begin to circulate, with many people using these very real and very tragic deaths to fuel their tales into fantastical stories. Or could they actually be more real than logical minds want to believe? The most popular legend, that of the Lady of the Lake, begins in 1958 with two young girls by the names of Delia Mae Parker Young and Susie Roberts. The girls had been at a dance in town, but quickly grew bored and decided to leave early. As the pair were driving home, they realized they were low on gas and made the decision to stop at a gas station to fill up. But then also decided to leave without paying and continued their drive home, never anticipating that the consequences of their choice, or karma coming into play, would lead to tragedy. As they approached a bridge over the now infamous lake, they suddenly lost control of the vehicle, sending them spiraling over the edge, crashing into the dark depths of the waters of Lake Lanier. It would be a year before a local fisherman would be out on the lake and would make the horrific discovery of a decomposing body floating in the water. It was clear the body had been in the water for some time, as it was completely unrecognizable, as she'd been tossed around by the lake waters, and the damage was evident, as her body was missing both hands. The state of her body would make it impossible for authorities to identify her, and she would be buried as a Jane Doe. That was until 1990, when the tragic truth was finally revealed. Local officers would recover a 1950s Ford sedan from the bottom of Lake Lanier. These officials would be shocked when they discovered the body of Susie Roberts still inside the sedan. It was with this gruesome discovery that the pieces would finally be put together. The unclaimed Jane Doe was, in fact, Delia Mae Parker Young. Finally, after nearly 40 years, her identity was revealed, and she could rest in peace. Or could she? Because if you were to ask the locals, they would tell you that while authorities could not officially identify the body of Delia prior to the vehicle's discovery, they knew exactly who the Jane Doe was. They had seen her. Locals would share tales of seeing the tragic young woman wandering around the bridge responsible for her demise, still wearing the blue dress she wore to the dance. She's seen reaching her arms out to those passing by, arms that are missing the hands. But is she reaching out for help? Or is she seeking vengeance for her life that was so tragically cut short, wanting to pull you down with her to spend an eternity in the murky depths of Lake Lanier? Whether the waters of this man-made reservoir are simply suffering from a lack of thorough planning upon its creation, leaving remaining debris and structures of a long-neglected town as the cause of so many predictable accidents, or are the waters cursed by the people of Oscarville, demanding their long-overdue recognition of the brutality, ignorance, and racism they endured leading to the town's demise, hence haunting the waters that serve as their tomb? One thing is certain: the facts can get a little blurry when dealing with urban legend. Thank you all so much for watching and for your patience with what has been admittedly a sporadic upload schedule lately. Life gets in the way sometimes, but we will always find our way back to the Press Start family. Thanks as always to Stop Propaganda and channel members Belle and Will. We are extremely grateful for our YouTube community. You aren't urban legend, just legends. Thank you again so much for watching. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of those around you. The world can be a dark place if we don't come together.